Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom.
People in every part of the globe are perishing because the judgment is low. From children to teens to elderly folks, this epidemic is incredibly bold. Wisdom is needed to see through the fog. Without it, we'll stumble and cease to the long. You're jumping without something to break and fall if you choose to ignore this beckoning call. The only people who will lose the war are those who don't know who they're fighting for. You are the only one who can decide your fate. Don't waste your life when you can live inside of grace. If we turn to God and behold His shining face, we will gain traction to run in this human race.
Hey, what's going on? JC Johnson here, and you are listening to For the Love of Wisdom. And on today's episode, we're going to be discussing the wisdom of professionalism.
Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom.
All right, what's going on? Welcome back. You're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And I'm your host, JC Johnson. Glad that you could hang out with me today. We are starting a new season of the show, and because of that, we're going to be, switching stuff up a little bit. So if you're used to the show being in a particular format, just know that we're making a couple changes, but they're all good changes. So hopefully, you'll appreciate what we have coming up here. Today, we're going to be discussing 4 new topics. Earlier last week, actually, we were joined by Will the Thrill, and we had a good time discussing the wisdom of eternity. And we spoke about eternity from 2 different aspects. One aspect was speaking about it in a sense of man's mortality, the fact that everyone has a limited time on the earth. One day everyone's gonna die. So we went from speaking about mortality to then getting into man's immortality. And we talked about how even though the physical body one day is gonna die, it's gonna decay, it's gonna pass away, the spiritual or the soul part of every human being, that's actually gonna go on and live forever. So we were discussing the implications of that and our duty as human beings. So today we're gonna be talking about a few different things. First, we're gonna start by talking about professionalism. So if you listen before, you'll see that we used to have show titles that ended in ITY. That was the suffix that we used pretty much for the first 50 episodes of this show. And now we're switching it up. So we're going to be having show titles that end with the suffix of ism, right? So talking about professionalism, altruism, humanitarianism, organism, right? A lot of different isms, a lot of different isms that we're going to be using. And I think that you're going to enjoy this next season. So as you heard, we have a new theme song, we have some new music and everything. So definitely continue to rock with us as we go forward and growing and expanding this show. All right, so of course, you can listen to us on North Coast Underground, where the Underground starts with you, Thursdays at 4 o'clock. But if you're not able to catch it live for whatever reason, no worries, because you can always listen to past episodes online. Just go on iTunes or Spotify, TuneIn, anywhere where you can listen to podcasts, and you'll be able to pull up For the Love of Wisdom. And with that, let's just get into it. If you're new to the show, the reason why we call it For the Love of Wisdom is because it comes from the word philosophy. And that word philosophy literally means love of wisdom. So those words, the first part of that word, it's a Greek word, philosophos, or sometimes translated as philosophia. And that first part, philo, Philo, it means love. And the second part, sophos, Sophos, it literally means wisdom. When you put the two together, it means love of wisdom, and that's where the word philosophy comes from. At least our English understanding of the word, it comes from that Greek origin. And loving wisdom is really important, because if you don't love wisdom, you're going to get yourself into a whole lot of trouble, right? So wisdom can be your best friend, and the lack of it can definitely be your biggest enemy. in life. So we want to make sure that we have as much wisdom as humanly possible. The good thing is, though, we don't have to rely on our human strength or abilities, because God can give us supernatural ability to have wisdom if we let him. He doesn't force us to do anything. Ultimately, it is our choice whether or not we want to let him in, but it's definitely the best thing to do. So let's get into this new study today. We're starting with professionalism, and if you're wondering, that suffix ism actually does have a meaning. Every time you see ism on the end of a word, it literally means a distinctive practice, system, or philosophy, typically a political ideology or an artistic movement. Okay, so it has Greek origins. It comes from the Greek word ismos, or sometimes it's translated as isma, depending on the word. And the French, then they made their own variation of the word, which is isme, isme, which brings us to the English version of it, which is ism. So that's what ism means, pretty much. Distinctive practice, system, or philosophy. And since we're going to be talking about professionalism today, I think it would be good to look at this article that was written by Chris Joseph. It was written for the Houston Chronicle, and it just came out a few months ago. And in here, he speaks about the 10 characteristics of professionalism. This is something that's really important, for you in work, or even if it's not even, just your work, whether it's your business, your own personal business, maybe it's your family, it could be your friendships, your marriage, your relationship with your children, whatever it is. Professionalism is very important, because without it, it makes you look a certain way. It makes you look like you're careless, or that you are not really too concerned with the well-being of others. And we're going to get more into that later when we discuss altruism. But really, having a love for other people, having a care for how you present yourself to them is really important, and it's going to help you to get a long way in life. So if you don't think you need to be professional, well, it may not catch up to you right now, but one day it will, and you'll see the reason. So don't let that be you. Don't be that person that has to learn by experience. It's better to learn from the wisdom and experiences of others. So if we look at this article, 10 characteristics of professionalism, Chris Joseph, he gives us 10 pretty good words that we need to focus on that have to do with how we can be professional. And again, this can translate to all parts of life. So the first one is appearance. A professional is neat in appearance. So he says here that how you dress is really important. Not just how you dress, like the certain clothing that you wear, but even little things like combing your hair, or washing your face, or remembering to brush your teeth, making sure that you don't have clothing that has a lot of rips or stains. I know that it's kind of the fashion maybe to have holes in your jeans and stuff like that, but again, if you're trying to be professional, why would you want to do that on purpose, right? People spend $100 on jeans that are already ripped. I don't understand it. I know it's a style, but it seems kind of counterproductive. I'd rather just, if I really want to have ripped jeans, I'd rather just, at least buy a pair that are intact and rip them myself. But that's neither here nor there. The main thing is, when we're talking about appearance, we want to make sure that we're presenting ourselves in a way that is professional, a way that properly represents who we are, so that people don't have a wrong idea of who we are before we even open our mouths. Because if you're making a first impression on someone, this is your first time speaking to them, you definitely want to make sure that you have that under control, right? You don't want to mess up in that area. So what's the second part of this? He talks about your demeanor. He says your demeanor should exude confidence, but not cockiness. And that's a really important distinction, by the way. Be polite and well-spoken, whether you're interacting with customers, superiors, or coworkers. You need to keep your calm, even during these tense situations. So again, not even just how you dress, but even how your body language is, how your facial expressions are, maybe your tone of voice. All of this stuff is really important because it says a lot about who you are. Without you even having to tell people who you are, it really speaks for you, whether you want it to or not. Reliability. This is really important because he says as a professional, you'll be counted on to find a way to get the job done. So you want to be reliable. You don't want to be one of those people who they always have to have a contingency plan for because they're not sure if you're going to show up, or they're not sure if you're going to hold up your end of the deal, or they're not sure if you're going to produce the quality of work that's necessary in order to accomplish the goals. So you want to be a reliable person. You want to be someone who's consistent. You want to have the same kind of work. You want to make sure your work ethic is on, it's on point at all times, that no one has to question that. And then he speaks of a few other things. One other thing I want to touch on, he speaks about ethics, and ethics is crucial. All right, this is so important. He says professionals such as doctors, lawyers, and public accountants must adhere to a strict code of ethics. Even if your company or industry doesn't have a written code, you should display ethical behavior at all times. That's definitely really important because without that, what do you really have? If you don't have a foundation to stand on, you really have nothing. So with that in mind, we're going to get ready to listen to some music, and we're going to be right back to finish up this topic on professionalism. You are listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets, and you're listening on North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. All right, we'll be right back.
The underground starts with you.
Hey, what's going on? JC Johnson here, back with For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. All right, and on today's show, we are discussing the wisdom of professionalism. So again, we are in a new season, and we switched it up a little bit. So if you're used to the way the show has been, you know that all the shows ended with the suffix ITY, but now we're changing it up, and each show title is going to end with an ism. Right, so we're talking about professionalism. Next time, we're going to be talking about altruism and so on and so forth. So definitely stay tuned. I think you're going to enjoy this new season here. We were discussing before the break, we were looking at an article that was written by Chris Joseph, and it was called 10 Characteristics of Professionalism. And I thought he did a really good job of outlining some of those important things that we have to focus on. One other thing that he talked about is accountability. And he said here that professionals are accountable for their actions at all times. So this is really important, to hold yourself accountable. You shouldn't have to be held accountable against your will because of your poor choices. But really somebody who's wise is going to be able to hold themselves accountable. Maybe you have some friends, people in your life, maybe other coworkers, or people who even report to you. And it's really important that you have accountability for yourself, so that you're just not going off doing whatever, because everyone has accountability. Even the president of the United States, believe it or not, based on what you might see on Twitter, even the president has accountability. There's certain things that he can't do, and he has much more power, at least, as far as within the government, than any of us do. So keep that in mind. Accountability is really important. It helps to keep us all grounded and to make good decisions overall. So what do some people have to say about this idea of professionalism that we can glean something from? One person is Erica Jong, and Erica Jong said something interesting. She said, I think professionalism is important, and professionalism means you get paid, right? So that's a really practical benefit of professionalism, right? She's straight to the point with that. She says, if you're professional, you're going to get paid. That means that when it comes time for opportunities, people are going to consider you because you're professional. If you're not professional, then you're going to be overlooked, right? So that's a really important one. Here's one from David Fincher. He says, "My idea of professionalism is probably a lot of people's idea of obsessive." So what does he mean by that? Well, just looking at that, to me, what he's trying to say is sometimes you can be seen as over the top when you're being professional. For example, let's say you go into the bank, and I'm sure you've had this experience. I know I've had this experience. Depending on what bank you go to, it seems like a lot of them are really trying to push this idea of hospitality when you go into the bank. Like, they're like, "Hey, we care. We want to make sure you're good. Hey, you want some coffee? We have a Keurig machine over here for you. Hey, you want to jump through the line faster? Just let me know what you need. I might be able to help you before you even get up to the counter." They're doing all these kind of things. They come in, they greet you, they smile, and they do all this. Why? Because they want people to feel that they're important. And this level of professionalism sometimes might make people uncomfortable. Maybe you're going into the bank, you don't want to talk to anybody. You're just trying to run straight to the counter so you can get your business done and get out of there. So even though sometimes this can rub people the wrong way, basically it's better to err on the side of caution when it comes to this by maybe being overly professional, maybe over the top. It's better than being unprofessional, right? Because that can rub people in a much worse way. So David Fincher, I think, is correct by saying, even if people think it's too much, it's obsessive, maybe you're focusing too much on that, it's actually a good thing, because ultimately that's what's going to get you results. Agatha Christie, a famous writer, one of the most famous writers in American history, has this to say. She said, "There was a moment when I changed from an amateur to a professional. I assumed the burden of a profession, which is to write even when you don't want to, don't much like what you're writing, and aren't writing particularly well." So she says here that basically when you're a writer, it doesn't matter if you don't get it right all the time. Sometimes you just need to do your job, put it out there, because it's going to connect with somebody. You may feel like it's not your best work, but even if it's not your best, it doesn't mean your best is not going to come next time. And this is one of the great things about Prince, who passed away recently, one of the best musicians of all time. And even just I was discussing Prince with someone not too long ago, and we were talking about how Prince put out so much music, he put out so much material, that even though it didn't always connect with people, like he didn't always have hits like Purple Rain. Some of his albums, some of his songs didn't do too well, but it never stopped him from putting out more material. So he never, let stuff sit in the vault because he felt like it wasn't good enough to put out. Ultimately, whenever he had something he had to say, whether it was profound or not, whether it was his best musically or not, he put it out. And people who are true Prince fans appreciated that, because they said, you know what, this may not be his best, but the fact that he's giving us so much material, it just makes me want to continue to listen to him no matter what he puts out. He can make a song about Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or the ABCs. I don't care. I'm going to listen to it just because it's my favorite artist. That's how a lot of people feel. And sometimes we have to remember that, because we can be hard on ourselves sometimes and feel like, oh, this isn't good enough, or I don't know if I should do this or that. I don't know if people are going to understand it or appreciate it. But really, this is something that I think Prince knew, and a lot of other people know also, especially Agatha Christie. Basically, sometimes you got to just roll with it, put it out. You never know who's going to connect with it. You never know what kind of impact it's going to have. There's a lot of bands who put out songs that they thought were just a stupid song that their record label wanted them to put out, and it ends up being like their number one song, their number one requested song, something that fans want to hear every time they're in concert. Why is that? Because sometimes it's the thing that you might think is insignificant or doesn't matter that could be the very thing that propels you to success. So don't sleep on anything that comes to your mind. So what does the Bible say about professionalism? It has a lot to say about it. A couple things here. Proverbs 22:9 It says here, this is in the NIV, it says, "Do you see someone skilled in their work? They will serve before kings. They will not serve before officials of low rank." So what is it saying here? It's saying that basically when you're professional, when you invest time into your craft, when you become the best that you can be at whatever it is that you have to do, it's going to open up doors for you, and you're going to be in places maybe that you never thought that you would be, right? Think of all the people who serve in the White House, or people who serve within the palace, people who serve the king, or princesses in England, kings and presidents and people like that around the world. All these people got there, and they may not have known that they were going to get there one day, but they got there because they were good at what they do. Somebody recognized their talent and said, "This is a person I want on my team. You know, this is a person that I want to be a trusted advisor. This is a person that I know is reliable and someone I can trust." That's a great place to be in. Here's one from Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 and 24. It says, "Work at everything you do with all your heart. Work as if you were working for the Lord, not for human masters." Okay, and this is super important, okay, because basically it's saying don't worry about the human being that you work for. You're really not working for them ultimately. Even if that person doesn't treat you well, even if this person doesn't compensate you the way you think you should be compensated, whatever work that you do, don't do it for them. Do it for God. Because if you do it for Him, it's going to lead to great things for you. Professionalism is important no matter what your circumstances are. Then it goes on to say, work because you know that you will finally receive as a reward what the Lord wants you to have. And ultimately, any reward that God has to give you is better than what any human being can give to you. So more on that after this. You are listening to North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. I'm JC Johnson, for the love of wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets.
Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come